And Amy, so out like Flynn, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, former NSA director, as of this morning, resigning last night, apologizing to the president and vice president for his incomplete recollection of his relevant conversation with the Russian ambassador. This kind of broke apart quickly because Kellyanne Conway was on MSNBC yesterday afternoon saying this.
Basic question here. Does the National Security Advisor right now enjoy the full confidence of President Trump?
Yes, General Flynn does enjoy the full confidence of the president, and this is a big week for General Flynn.
Yeah, it's a big week that wasn't for General Flynn. It went from full confidence to evaluating to fluid to ego.
Yeah, so most of us, while we were sleeping, he wrote that resignation letter, and now the question is, who's going to be the new NSA director? Kellogg is the interim director right now.
Right, retired Army General Keith Kellogg, who was top policy advisor to Trump's presidential campaign. He's appointed acting national security advisor of those under consideration, according to NBC News, to replace Flynn permanently. Retired Navy Vice Admiral Robert Harward, former deputy commander of U.S. Joint Forces Command. That's Mr. Admiral Howard's former position, as well as Kellogg, as well as
drum roll.
Bad boys. What you going to do? David Petraeus.
And Petraeus is going to the White House today, according to sources, and they close to him said that he's going to make a run for the job, but noted that he knows he has a lot of baggage.
Well, and it seems that the resignation of Flynn raises questions about Flynn's integrity, but it also raises questions about the CIA's integrity. And this was the point that is raised in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, prior to Flynn's resignation, and it's the point raised by former National Security Advisor Richard Pearl when it comes to those that had the long knives out for Flynn from the beginning.
And if he's pushed out by maneuvering on the part of the CIA, working with opponents of the administration, it will be a very bad sign for things to come.
So for more on this, we're pleased to be joined by an expert in the space. He is Lieutenant Colonel Cedric Leighton. He is a military intelligence expert, security consultant who served on the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the National Security Council. Colonel, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. It's good to be with you.
So your assessment of this saga, which ended with Flynn's resignation last night.
Well, I used to work for General Flynn when I was at the Pentagon, and it is one of those situations where it's very clear that I think General Flynn, I'm so sorry to say, was in over his head. The National Security Advisor position is not a tactical position. It is not a position that is one where somebody who is used to dealing with the tactical employment or operational employment of troops can really succeed. It is a position where somebody has to have a strategic vision. Flynn is a workaholic. He is somebody who, was in there and, understood that, in his mind, being busy equated to doing the right thing. And he I think, overstepped his bounds very quickly here and went into this position thinking that he could not only control U.S. foreign policy, but also access to the president and, in essence, design a foreign policy independent of anything that the U.S. government had done before. So it was an inevitable step, this resignation. It came a bit quicker than I think most of us thought it would come, but I see it as an inevitable step for sure.
Lieutenant Colonel, do you think this was a scandal, though, of his own making? I mean, if he would have come clean and told the truth, sometimes the cover-up's worse than an alleged crime.
That's right, Amy. I think that's absolutely correct. I think that in this situation, not only did he, do things on his own operationally. I think he went far, at least the evidence so far indicates he went beyond what his purview was. But the often, as you said, the cover-up is worse than the crime, and got people around the Nixon administration and Nixon himself in trouble during Watergate, and the same thing is true in this particular case. Not that these two things are equal, but in this situation, you have a guy who, in essence, is alleged to have lied to the Vice President of the United States, and that is something you just don't do. It violates every tenet of the military code of ethics, certainly the officers' code, and it's something that you just do not do.
What about on the other side, the intelligence community? Said at the outset there was certainly resistance to Flynn. Richard Pearl made that point. The Wall Street Journal writing yesterday before his resignation, saying that this talk of reporters who knew the nature of the conversation between Flynn and the Russian ambassador. The Wall Street Journal suggests that even with surveillance, intelligence community getting a FISA warrant to monitor foreign officials, they're supposed to use minimization procedures that don't let them listen to communications of Americans who may be caught in such eavesdropping. In other words, they're supposed to protect identity and speech of Americans. Yet the Washington Post says it spoke to multiple U.S. officials claiming to know what Mr. Flynn said on that call. So why didn't it use the minimization procedures to protect Flynn? Or did it have a court order to listen to Mr. Flynn as well? And if it did, why? Are those legitimate questions?
They're absolutely legitimate questions, and Dan, you're absolutely right that there are minimization procedures in place to protect U.S. citizens from being inadvertently listened to in conversations that they may have with foreigners. Now, most people, if they're speaking to a foreigner, are not government officials, and they're not involved in political discussions, and the rules are designed to protect them. The difference may be in this case that the FBI, because this is a counterintelligence target to the Russian ambassador, is a counterintelligence target. The FBI does have the authority to listen in on American conversations if they have a warrant, a court order, or there's an investigation going on. And in this particular case, they basically have what they call cast iron coverage over entities like the Russian ambassador. They are, the most prominent counterintelligence targets that are out there. So what you're dealing with here is a situation where General Flynn may very well be the subject of an ongoing investigation. There are reports that there is an investigation on that's going on about the ties that the Trump administration and before that the Trump campaign had to Russia. And as part of that, it may very well be that they were using the authority that they may have had as part of that investigation to listen in on these calls. It is also true that once you assume a political position or are about to assume a political position, the rules do change for you, and you are not always protected by minimization procedures or other rules that are designed to protect American citizens.
But is there concern that the CIA and the intelligence community writ large is politicized, and that there are elements in the intelligence community that are actively working to undermine individuals within the Trump administration they don't like, perhaps including the president? There seems to be some divided opinion from a lot of the intelligence experts we've spoken to about that.
Well, it's, the intelligence community is designed to be as apolitical as possible, but then a lot of people are certainly human, and it is clear that there are people within the intelligence community who do not like President Trump, and certainly did not like General Flynn, and they have long memories, and they understand how the bureaucracy works, and they understand what they can do. And that is, I think, one of the situations that the Trump administration has found itself in, because some of the things that they have said and done to question the legitimacy of the intelligence community or the efficacy of the intelligence community, that angers people, and that could have played a role in some of this. So it is possible that there are people who are actively pursuing is in essence, the channeling of the Trump administration at the very least, and possibly are actively working to undermine it. But they are certainly doing so in an unofficial capacity because now they work for President Trump, and they have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution, and that's what they're looking at, and that is, I think, the main focus of certainly all of the legitimate people within the intelligence community.
Now, it's such a stunning fall from grace for a man who has a honorable, decorated military career. He spent almost every day with Donald Trump, candidate Trump, briefing him every day on intelligence briefings. And how do you think, what's next for him? I mean, how hard, first of all, was it probably for him to resign his position? And where do you think he's going to go from here?
Knowing him, quite a bit, I would say that it was very difficult for General Flynn to resign his position. Work was his life. He was absolutely dedicated to, before he became a public figure, he was absolutely dedicated to the special operations community, to the Army, to the military in general. The problem that he had was that he knew what he knew and didn't necessarily know what he didn't know. And that caused him problems once he assumed positions of great responsibility, including on the Joint Staff, and then after that at the Defense Intelligence Agency. As far as what's next for him, I think he's going to probably go through a period of introspection. There have been several things that have happened, both to him and to his son, in terms of their public exposure and what they've done with it, that point to certain issues that they're going to have to deal with. I think that eventually he'll pull out of it, and he'll probably do something in the defense world, or in perhaps in the writing and speaking world. But that's going to take a while for him to get there. I think he's pretty much in shock that this has happened, and it's going to be tough for him to work his way out of it.
And of the names that have been mentioned, and maybe there's others that are or not under consideration that should be described or should be included, but from the interim, General Keith Kellogg, along with retired Navy Vice Admiral Robert Harward, along with Petraeus, do you have a favorite among those three, or somebody else that's not included in that list?
Well, I would say that Admiral Harward is probably the best bet. Being a retired Navy SEAL and then former deputy commander of Central Command, the command that's responsible for everything in the Middle East, he's got a lot of experience, and he seems to have the smarts to work the bureaucracy in a very, very good way. And that's really what you have to do. You're the grand coordinator when you're the national security advisor, and in his particular case, in Admiral Harward's particular case, I think his credentials are ones that will be attractive to President Trump, and I believe that he's the other thing that helps him is that he previously served on the National Security Council, so he actually knows what this is like. He understands how other elements of not only the intelligence community but the operational military work, and he would probably be the best choice. I don't think that General Kellogg will stay very long, primarily because of his age. He's 72 right now. And General Petraeus could very well become the national security advisor, but there is, some baggage associated with that, as we all know, through his affair with his biographer. So I would say that Harward is probably the cleanest choice that the Trump administration could make right now. As far as other people are concerned, there are certain possibilities out there, but I don't think, the way this White House operates, if you haven't heard the name by now, it's probably one of those situations where that person will not be brought in to do it. The other thing that I could think of is K.T. McFarland, who's the Deputy National Security Advisor.
Level her up.
She might be a good fit for this, but it sounds like they don't want to do that, right now. But she certainly has had the experience in the past and is a good public face for the administration, or would be a good public face for the administration.
All right. He is Lieutenant Colonel Cedric Leighton, military intelligence expert, security consultant who served both on the Joint Chiefs of Staff as well as the National Security Council. Colonel, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Dan. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.